Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Inept General coming to you with a last-minute DLC prediction for what we're going to call, over the course of this video, the Rat and the Snake DLC, which is the upcoming DLC for Total War Warhammer 2, whereby we will probably get new units and 2 new Legendary Lords for the Lizardmen and for the Skaven. Now, I'm not going to faff around with going through all the units and all the lords. I'm just going to kind of give you right down, balls against the wall, just what I think is going to be in this DLC pack and why, and try and make a good case for it. So, when looking at what we're going to get in the DLC pack, we have to look back at what we've had in previous DLC packs in the Total War Warhammer series, and the most recent one of those was the Queen and the Crone. Now, in that one, we got 2 new units for the High Elves, 1 new hero, and of course all the regiments of renown. Now, for the Dark Elves, we actually got 2 units plus the Charybdis later on, and a new type of general, the Supreme Sorceresses, as well as the other legendary lord Helbron, with Alariel being her counterpart for the High Elves, along with the regiments of renown, of course. So basically, in that, you're looking at 2 to 3 units, 1 hero or general type, and the regiments of renown. Now, even if we go further back, we look at the Grim and the Grave. For that, there were 2 units for the Vampire Counts, and there were 3 units for the Empire, roughly speaking. They got the Strigoi General, and the Empire got the Arch-Lector. And there were, of course, regiments of renown for both teams. And for the first one ever, the King and the Warlord, there was sort of 2, I'd say 2.5-ish units is the way I'd describe it there for the Dwarves, and 3 new units for the Greenskins, each getting a new type of general, if I remember correctly. So, overall, looking at all these Lord packs we've had in the past, we can make a very educated guess that we're going to get 2 new Legendary Lords in the pack, we're going to get 2 to 3 units on both sides of the armies, and we're going to get a new hero or general type for both sides. Looking at that as our foundation of what we're going to expect in this pack, let's delve into what maybe each side shall expect, and we'll start with the Lizardmen. So, when looking at the Lizardmen for this upcoming DLC pack, I think this one is a bit of a no-brainer. It's been one people have been expecting since almost before the release of Total War Warhammer 2, and that is Tehenowyn, the Prophet of Sotek, and he is a fantastic character, very much focused on fighting Skaven. So that's why everyone's expecting him to make an appearance in this DLC pack. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about him. If you'd like to hear his story, his icon will be popping up in the top right-hand corner of the screen now, or you'll find a link to my lore video on him in the description below. But great character, is very well known for going up against Skaven, so I think he is just going to be the Legendary Lord for the Lizardmen, no question about it really in my mind. Now I might be wrong, I doubt it on this one though. Some of the rest of this stuff is a little bit iffier. Now with the Lizardmen in this pack, there's going to be a free DLC Legendary Lord as well, and that is because each one of the factions in Total War Warhammer 2 seem to be getting a free Lord, and the Skaven have had theirs, the Dark Elves have had theirs, the High Elves have had theirs, the Lizardmen are just the last ones to go, so this will probably be their free Legendary Lord in this pack. Now, when looking at the Legendary Lords, we could go with a number of different options, but I have a feeling it's going to be one of 2 characters based out of the city of Itza. As we see the icon for the Itza faction here, it's kind of very hinted at that these 2 characters are involved there. The Golden Mask representing a character known as Lord Croak, who's technically a dead Slann Mage Priest, but once the most powerful of all the Slann Mage Priests and the eldest of them all. But he might not make an appearance as a Legendary Lord simply because he's kind of a corpse with a hovering spirit that can't actively really communicate with anybody, but he can fire off spells when you drag him into a battlefield. So I'm a little bit iffy on Lord Croak, and there is some positives and negatives to the Gorok, his white albino companion here, who's probably the strongest fighter on foot. Not the most experienced or the best general, but just the strongest hand-to-hand fighter the Lizardmen have. But the issue with him is that on the tabletop, he was actually a hero, So it's maybe a bit of a toss-up between the two of these. Now, with Tehenuen, the Prophet of Sotek, probably being a legendary lord that does a lot of what Skarsnik did for the goblins in the first game, making goblins an actual viable option to build an army around, I think this legendary lord will do the same for skinks. So the free legendary lord might also be skink focused, in which case we're really looking at several options. Leading that pack is probably Teto Echo, and there's a couple of heroes as well in the shape of Tic-Tac-Toe on his Pterodon there, and Oxaltl, the camouflaged chameleon skink. So those could be other options, but I think they're a little bit out of it, so I'm not going to go too deep into them. So for me, it's either going to be Tehenuen, and as a free legendary lord, we're going to see either Gorok or Lord Croak. I think those will be the ones we're looking at. Now, moving on from legendary lords, we have to discuss what the next hero might be. Now, the Lizardmen actual starting army already kind of filled in all its heroes. The only option I could think of for another possible hero or general for the skinks is something that approximates the Prophet of Sotek, because he's a very unique character in some of the ways he functions. You couldn't really build a whole general type around him, because no one really functions like that on the tabletop. The closest thing you'd get to a kind of new kind of skink hero, as opposed to the chiefs that we already have and the priests that we have in the game already as well, is the skink oracles. Now, they appear in the game alongside their troglodyons here, their mighty blind dinosaur creatures. Now, they could operate as a new type of hero in the game. I think could be a natural possibility. That kind of ties in a bit more to one of the other characters, but if you're just looking to throw in a hero, he's the only option that actually springs to mind for me. So that would be my shout. If we're definitely going to see a hero, it would be him. So moving on from the heroes, let's go on to the units. Now, for me, the units was a little bit tougher, but I think the first unit we have to include, that's an iconic unit for the Lizardmen, is the Salamanders. The fact they weren't in the starting army was a bit shocking, but the Salamanders are big lizards that breathe huge gouts of fire down on the enemy, work very much like the flamethrowers of the dwarves and stuff like that. So I think that would be a great addition to the army, just because they're just so iconic for the Lizardmen army, they kind of need to be in there at some point. So I think we'll get Salamanders, also kind of skink focused on the tabletop, with their handlers all being skinks. The next up, I think, will be the Ripperdactyls. Now, these are basically a meteor version of the Pterodon riders. They're built for close combat. So the actual idea that the Lizardmen have something that can hold its own against maybe Pegasus Knights or something else in the air, do some actual decent melee damage, is a good idea, and I think this unit would fit a very big hole in the Lizardmen roster currently, so it'd be great to see them make an appearance in Total War Warhammer 2. And then we're getting into some different difficult areas. I think those two probably shoe-in to get into the game. I think the Bastiladon with the Ark of Sotek is an interesting concept, and if you do include the Prophet of Sotek, one might argue that you probably have to include this unit as well. The idea behind the unit is a Bastiladon with a special device on its back that basically spits out an infinite amount of snakes that fight with the Lizardmen army, poisonously kill all the enemies of the Lizardmen, and that's just the idea of it. So you'd basically have a Bastiladon with an aura effect of damage around it is what you're looking at. They could do something really good with it at Creative Assembly in terms of making it look really nice as it moves around. And they might give it something like the Tomb Swarm that the Tomb Kings have. But because it's Prophet of Sotek themed, I thought I had to include it in this list. Now, I know I'm breaking my own rules here where I said there would only be 2 to 3 units. We've gone to the 3rd unit. You're thinking that should be it. But I do think I want to include just one more thing. That's the Stegodon Engine of the Gods. Now, the idea of the Engine of the Gods is not a mount we've seen for the Stegodons yet. It would take a little bit of work, but they already have the Stegodons. They already have how mounts work on Stegodons. You'd have to throw it on. And that's only because it is the Prophet of Sotek's actual mount. He has an Engine of the Gods. That's why I think it might be included. Not necessarily as its own separate unit, perhaps, but it will perhaps be a mount option for some heroes later on down the line. So it'd be great to see an Engine of the Gods make an appearance. And I know that was 4, broken my own rules, but hopefully we see all of that stuff in there. That's my shout. That's what I think we'll get for the Lizardmen part of this DLC. Moving on from the Lizardmen, we've got the Skaven. And for the Skaven, looking at the Legendary Lords, the one everyone wants, the most popular Skaven Legendary Lord that was a bit mad that it wasn't in the game to start with, is Thanquol. Thanquol, a legendary character within Warhammer Fantasy lore, appeared in all kinds of books, other games, stories. He is the bane of many people's existence in that universe. But Thanquol has not made an appearance, and I think because he hasn't yet, he won't until some kind of weird end times DLC for the third game planned in the series. So that's why it's maybe a strong shout. If we should see him. He should be the DLC Lord for the Skaven, but I don't think it's going to be him for those reasons. I just don't think they're going to include him till the third game, make him a special character, make a big deal out of him turning up in the game. So if we're not getting the most iconic Legendary Lord, what are we getting? Well, when we look at the Skaven roster, there are different clans in Skaven society, and they each have different types of units associated with them. Now, for the Prophet of Sotek, his enemies were Clan Pestilence. Now, it was a bit of a surprise when Clan Pestilence was announced as kind of a fully fleshed out clan, almost in terms of their unit representation in the Skaven army in the starting version of Total War Warhammer 2. I definitely thought they'd hold most of that back until later in the game, but they held out units from two main factions, and that is Clan Scryer, which deals in mostly engineering stuff, and that is Clan Molder, which deals in kind of Frankenstein bioengineering stuff. They're kind of responsible for things like the Skaven Abomination, the Rat Ogres, stuff of that ilk. Now, there's a couple of units missing from their ranks. You could look at Giant Rats, you could look at Pack Masters, and you could look at maybe possibly Wolf Rats, although that is a Forge World model. But where there's a lot more iconic stuff missing, and stuff you would have expected to see in the game earlier, is of Clan Scryer, the kind of tech-focused clan. For the two lords there, the options are for Clan Molder, you have Frot the Unclean, and for Clan Scryer, you have Ikit Claw. Now, my money, because I said before, most of the units that are iconic to Skaven are missing from Clan Scryer in the game at the moment, that I think Clan Scryer will be the shout, and so I think Ikit Claw will be the choice for the Legendary Lord for the Skaven in this DLC pack. Now, Ikit Claw and the Prophet of Sotek don't necessarily have any particular gripe between the two of them. It's not a perfect fit, but it fits the gaps in the rosters and where they've decided to go with the game thus far. Really, the enemies of Ikit Claw are probably more Dwarven focused, and the enemies of Tehenuin are more Clan Pestilence focused, so Lord Skrolk and that kind of part, that faction in Total War Warhammer, which are already based out in Lustria, those are going to be his enemies. So I think that's going to be the look of the Skaven new Legendary Lord, Ikit Claw. Then we go to the heroes. Now, I mentioned the Pack Master already, so I think the Pack Master could actually be a viable new hero to be introduced in terms of giving buffs to monsters, to rat ogres, stuff like that. I think there's a potential gap there in the heroes for the Skaven faction, but there's also the option of the Chieftain, kind of a fighting hero for the Skaven that could be included as well, which we haven't seen in Total War Warhammer 2 as of yet. And there's kind of my favorite, which I really hope we see, but again might be saved with an end times kind of Thanquol pack, and that is the Vermin Lords. Basically the summoned demons that the Skaven can conjure up to lead their army. So that'd be a new general type, and kind of heavily hinted at in the Vortex story of the Skaven campaign. So I would love to see the Vermin Lords. If I'm going to be skeptical, I'd say it'd be maybe the Chieftain or the Pack Master. If I had to put money on one of them, I'd maybe say the Chieftain, but we'll have to maybe wait and see on that one. It's probably the thing I'm least sure about in terms of what the hero or general for the Skaven will be. Love to see the Vermin Lords, but you know, the cynic in me says Chieftain. Alright, so moving on from the hero, let's get to the units. Now, as I mentioned, mainly Clan Scryer focused if we're looking at getting Ikit Claw as the Legendary Lord. And the first one, probably more iconic than the Salamanders are for the Lizardmen, are the Warplock Jezzails for the Skaven. Basically massive sniper rifles, huge range these guys should have on them, just do a great deal of damage when they hit. A bit of missile resistance as well, because they basically have massive shields up in front of them. But the fact that they weren't in the original game was a bit of a surprise, but I think we will see them in this DLC. The other unit, you know, kind of something that I think fans would love to see is the Rattling Gun. Basically a huge minigun that the Skaven have, some armor-piercing damage there potentially. A devastating weapon if used correctly, I'm sure. So we're looking at 2 missile units here. So at this point, if I'm looking for a 3rd unit, I'm looking at what's missing from the Skaven roster, what's missing from Clan Scryer in particular, and nailing it down to those few choices. Now with 2 missile units, there is the possibility of a 3rd missile unit like the Poisoned Wind Mortar, but I don't think that's what they'll do. I don't think they'll give us 3 new missile units. I think what we might get is the Doomflayer, just because I think they'll want to throw in a melee unit in there just to keep that interesting. So I think we'll maybe get the Doomflayer, which is a metal ball of death, kind of like an almost motorbike of death that can go around the battlefield. So I think those will be the 3 units from the Skaven. Now, we're expecting news and maybe a trailer from the DLC either this week or next, probably. So it's going to happen anytime soon. I'm either going to be proved a very wise man or a fool. But basically what I think we're looking at is Ikit for the Skaven as a legendary lord, the Prophet of Sotek as a legendary lord for the Lizardmen. They will go head-to-head in a campaign, and I think it will be brilliant, and I can't wait to see both those characters in the game. Fingers crossed. Again, I might be wrong. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. We'll know in probably a couple of weeks or so, even if that. Looking forward to be proven completely incorrect on all of this stuff I've just guessed, but you never know, I might get a couple of things right. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed my take. I know a few of you have been asking in different scenarios what I think will be in this DLC pack, so I just thought I'd make a video to lay it all out for you right there. If you're interested on the lore of Ikit or Tehenuin, do check the links appearing now. But other than that guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to catch you all on the next one. Alright guys, bye.